Hi, my name's Matthew Robert Payne, and I'm a Christian author. I've self-published about 55 books. About 1,000 people a month read my Kindle books. Also have paperbacks and hardcovers and audiobooks. I had a episode a few days ago, was very high and manic. I was speaking with a lot of bravado, a bit of delusion, a bit crazy, and I did this message for a girl that I'm pursuing, someone that I love, and made like a real fool of myself. And I was doing some editing and listening to some videos while I was editing, and I heard what I said, and then I sent off an apology to her and described a little about what mania is and what being sick is, what I call being sick, and what delusional sort of thoughts can come out when you're in mania. And I uploaded that video to her to let her know that I was sick and that was a part of my illness. And I'm sorry for what I recorded before. And went into a little bit detail, and a friend of mine who watches all my YouTube videos wrote an email to me and said that she was very encouraged by my honesty and my humility and the details that I shared in that 9-minute video. And she said that that would benefit a lot of people if they listen to it. So with this girl that I love, Amber, in mind, and this woman who wrote to me and was encouraged by my video in mind, and other people who will surf on to this title on YouTube with you in mind, I thought I'd do a little more extensive teaching or sharing on bipolar disorder. So that's the reason why I have this video. This t-shirt, this hoodie says Prodigy. And, you know, a lot of people with tremendous gifts in this world that change the world are called prodigies. And a friend of mine in my church bought this, former church, bought this for me, and I love it. And it's winter here in Sydney, Australia, on August the 6th, 2019, when I'm recording that. Go Trump in 2020. So the first point is, how long have I had it? I've had this illness for about 25 years, since I was 27. And so I've suffered with this, the consequences of this, for 25 years. And I would say that the bipolar disorder has a cumulative effect on you. In other words, it gets worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. And I'm not saying that the symptoms of it get worse. When you get medicated, the symptoms can get a lot better. But what I'm saying is the overall sadness, the overall suffering, the overall pain continues to get worse. You have deeper regret for having it, deeper sadness for having to suffer through it. And when I recorded this video, when I was in mania, when I was sick, I deeply regret this girl I love seeing that. And it really upset me for a couple of days, until I was assured by God that you know, after she saw it and after she saw my explanation video, she come to respect me a little bit more. And I'll have confirmation. I'll be seeing her in 2 days, and hopefully I'll get confirmation that that's exactly what happened. So I've had it for 25 years. That's a quarter of a century. 25 years is like a good marriage. You know, if you've been married 25 years, it's an extensive sort of block out of my life, almost half of my life. Point number 2, why did I go to hospital the first time? So they used to call this many years ago. They used to call a psychotic break, which they call it these days, but they used to call it a nervous breakdown. And all I knew about nervous breakdowns was that stay away from a person who's had a nervous breakdown. And that was what I learned as a youth. Is we had a friend in our street, a young girl my age, that I even asked to the Australian equivalent to of the prom, and she almost came. But this young girl that I fancied, who was a friend of mine, her mother had a nervous breakdown, and her mother was a bit crazy. And, even 25 years ago, even 40 years ago when I was young, bipolar had a tremendous stigma that it still has today. I can be on a train, on a bus, and I can ask the person what they do for a living, and they may say that they do this and do this, and eventually they used to turn around to me and say, what do I do for a living? And I would say I'm on a disability support pension, and they say, why is that? What's your disability? And I'd say, I've got bipolar disorder, and suddenly they'd get scared. And you just see the fear go into their head. These days, when people ask me what I do for a living, I say that I'm a writer, and I do like spiritual prophecies, like spiritual readings for people. It gets a lot more respect. And they may ask me then, how many books have you written? Which is like a polite question that people ask. And when I say 55, you see their mouth drop, and they're tremendously impressed because not many people have written 55 books, and certainly dropped $100,000 to self-publish them. There's not many people in the world who've done that. A symptom of bipolar is you can be very productive. You can be very productive. And for 3 years, I wrote a new book and financed a new book every month. I spent $2,000 a month, and every month I self-published another book. And if you look onto my Amazon homepage under Matthew Robert Payne, and you look at the dates published, you'll find that they were all date. But you can't do that now because Amazon have removed the publication date from the headings on the Amazon pages, which I find pretty frustrating, because I like to look at how recent a book is to know how recent the knowledge is. So why did I go to hospital the first time is my next point. I was married 25 years ago, and my wife left me. She started a relationship with someone else, and I entered into like a custody battle, which moved into an access battle, fighting to have more than 2 days every 2 weeks access. I wanted equal access, and I was fighting for shared access to my son. And I had witchcraft poured out on me. That witchcraft started to operate like noises, like demons. Where I experienced a clock face, a picture on a clock face, that the actual eyes in the picture move and follow me. I watched going behind buses with a picture on a bus, and the actual eyes in the picture moving and watching me. Things were moving, things were going crazy, and what I determined as witchcraft was coming heavily against me, was being sent by my ex-wife, who was doing some witchcraft on me. No one, my parents, people are told, my psychiatrist, no one actually believed that witchcraft happened to me. It's still today, people don't believe it. Psychiatrists will tell you, if you're talking about demons and spiritual things, you're naturally crazy. So me saying what happened actually got me locked up. Me saying what I was experiencing got me locked up. I also thought I was, in the midst of this psychotic break, I actually thought I was one of the 2 prophets that are going to be sent to earth just before Jesus comes back. And I was convinced of that, and I thought I was that. And so that was a delusion. I was in a delusion. That delusion never left me for 16 years. Even though I was medicated, I believed that fully for 16 years. Until God sent a young man with a prophet's gift to actually share with me that I wasn't one of those people. So that's how I ended up in my first psychotic break, my first, the old term, nervous breakdown 25 years ago. And my brain, I was put under so much pressure that my brain just split. My brain just cracked, and it's never been the same since. So point number 3, why did I return to hospital? So I've been to hospital 4 times, and the 3 other times I went back to hospital is because I went off my medication. One problem, a major problem with people with bipolar is when they get medicated, they start feeling normal, they start feeling right, they start feeling like they've got in control of their brain. And believe me, when you're having a psychotic break, you lose control of your brain. So they think they're happy, they're centered, they're working in their purpose, they're being productive again, everything's going fine in their life. And so they say, I don't need this medication, I'm fixed. The problem with a Christian is Pentecostals mainly and charismatics will teach you that you can be healed of everything. And they'll teach you one sign of being healed is just to put down your medication and walk in your freedom. And so I had a voice speaking to me that was masquerading itself as Jesus, and he told me that I was healed and I didn't need my medication. So 3 times, he told me 3 times, I acted in faith and walked off my medication. And within 6 weeks, I was locked up in hospital again, highly psychotic and highly mentally ill. So for the last 10 years, I've been on my medication. I haven't returned to hospital. Doesn't mean that I can't get delusional. Doesn't mean that I can't get a little psychotic. But if I get plenty of sleep and plenty of rest, I can avoid that. So I suggest, if you're listening to this, I suggest if you have a loved one that you get them to listen to this. The reason you go back to hospital in most instances is because you go off your medication. You need to stop going off your medication. You need to stop it. No matter how well you feel, you're only feeling well because of the medication. You'd be a crazy mess if you're off it. And if your friend or your mother or your loved one is showing you this video, you need to listen to me and know that you need to stay on your medication. So point number 4 is now I stay out of hospital. Now I don't get locked up. A few days ago, I'd had a day and a half or 2 days without sleep, and I got messed up and I got sick and I got psychotic, and it showed in the video. I've downloaded the video now. I've taken a video offline that I actually did, but it was very embarrassing, and it could have hurt a relationship that I really care about, and a girl I'm really pursuing. And I'm hoping that this video and the 9-minute video of the explanation will give her better insight and understanding into who this guy is that loves her. Okay, point number 5 is symptoms of mania. So I just want to share, mania is the old term for bipolar is manic depressive, and it's called mania. When you're psychotic, when you're delusional, you're in this high state of mania. I will say that I interviewed a friend of mine that had bipolar that I met years later after school. I talked to him about 15 years ago, and we both worked out that we both had bipolar. And I found out that he tried every drug up until 15 years ago. Probably ice wasn't around then, but he tried every drug, heroin, everything. And I asked him, how is all the drugs compared to the manic high? Where does the manic high stand compared to all the drugs. And he said nothing comes close to the manic high. And so here's a person up until 15 years ago had tried every high in drugs, and he said nothing compares, nothing's as good. So you can understand if there's a way to get high, if there's a way to get into mania. I found even with medication, the way I can get myself high is to stay up for 2 days. And the longer I stay up, the higher I get. And I love it. And that's the problem, is that it can go from being highly creative and happy and excited into sickness and delusion, and it can do damage. And it's very hard to pull back, even after 25 years. The feeling is so beautiful, it's so good that I'm still not disciplined to pull myself back. So here's some symptoms of mania. There's not an extensive. You can go and consult a professional book on this and get an extensive list, but these are some that I recognize in myself. Sleeplessness. You don't have to sleep. Some people would, I like to say that the longer I stay up, the more I'll get injected with natural speed, or people take speed in a pill. It's like I'm on speed. I can go 1, 2, 3 days and 3 nights up, sleeplessness. And the higher you get, the harder it is to get to sleep because you're so high. You also experience a euphoric feeling that you just, you can do anything. You're so good. Everything is so good, so amazing. Everything is just so awesome. And it's awesome, man. And so you have this euphoric feeling, which my friend was talking about when he said there was no drug. Like if it can be organized and arrange itself into an increased libido. You can have a higher sex drive than the average person when you're in mania, and which would really work well for prostitutes and sex workers, because that have the energy to perform really well. But this can get people with bipolar in trouble, because they can be real sexual deviants. You can feel as though money is no problem. So I've never had a credit card because of this. So the only money I can spend is money in my bank. But if you have credit cards in this society, it's not unheard of to spend $50,000 on a bender, on a manic high, and get yourself into impossible debt. You can have excited speech, and this is what happened a few days ago when Amber, the girl that I love, falling in love with, I had this video, and I went for 22 minutes, and it was a whole lot of BS, all this bravado and bragging. But you can have this really excited speech when you're in mania. You can have delusions. You can have the difference between normal thought and insanity and delusions is delusions don't make sense. It's just taking something to the third step instead of just having the first step. It's like speaking about the third step when you haven't done the second step, or speaking about the fifth step and you haven't done the second step. It's like being totally in front of what's normal, and that's a good way to explain it. I'm glad I explained it that way. So now, when you're in mania, you can actually have good thoughts and creative thoughts, and what you're talking about could be delusion at the time, but years down the track, you could have done all those steps and it not be delusion anymore, but reality. So another thing, not only do you have excited speech, but you could speak for 2 hours and no one get a word in, talking non-stop. And in mania, this can really cause you to have no friends, or drive your good friends away because they can't endure how much you talk. So talking non-stop is one of those things. So also, I've noticed that my speech gets louder when I'm in mania. And people will comment, "Don't be so loud. Why are you speaking so loud? Can you lower your voice?" When you're in mania, you don't know you're speaking loud with a higher volume. You need someone to actually say you're speaking loud. You have this feeling like you can conquer the world. You have this, you're convinced that you're powerful and you're awesome and you're great and you can conquer the world. And all of these put together can make it very dangerous for people, and very dangerous for the person who's suffering the mania. Here's some benefits I can see of mania. So you can have times of high production. So long ago, when it used to take an hour with my internet speed and whatever, it used to take an hour for 10 minutes of video to load up. I did 54 10-minute videos. So I did 54 10 minutes, which 6 10 minutes is an hour. So 6 9s, 9 6s are 54. So 9 hours worth of recording of video and 54 hours of uploading is 63 hours of work. And in the 63 hours of work, I was only up for 72 hours. So I had a few hours watching TV between videos, going to the toilet and eating, but I did 63 hours worth of work in 72 hours. That's very, very phenomenal productivity. I stayed up for 3 days and 3 nights and recorded on video my first draft of my book, The Parables of Jesus Made Simple. I've since gone back to that book and updated it, and it's called The Parables of Jesus Made Simple, Updated and Expanded Edition. I'll tell you something else about that, is I did no research on those 54 stories of Jesus. I didn't read concordances. I didn't read other people's opinions. I didn't do anything. I just allowed the Spirit of God to teach me and show me what they meant. I just turned the video on and spoke for 10 minutes. Back then, my YouTube license wouldn't allow my videos to be more than 10 minutes. And so I used to record under 10 minutes, and that's why they were 10 minutes. I learned to make chapters 10 minutes in future books, because that's about 3 or 4 pages and it keeps the whole book consistent. So, so you can have high creativity. Was I mania then? Well, was I delusional then? Not so much, but I had the ability as a manic depressive to stay up for 3 days and 3 nights. Another benefit that I found of being up and keeping myself up is, and mania is, you can be very creative. Now, some musicians and some creative people and artists and stuff, they get on medication and they totally lose their creativity. They lose their creative talent. They lose their creative gift. And this is why so many artists and creative people drop the medication so they can get their creativity back. If you get a musician who has to write music and lyrics via inspiration, if you cut that inspiration flow, their life is meaningless. The reason for their life has been cut off. So many creative people want to get back to the mania. They want to get back to the sickness. They want to get back to the bipolar. So many artists. Mariah Carey is an artist who's writes some beautiful songs. She's bipolar, and that is part of the creativity. So another benefit is seeing outside the box. So so many inventors and musicians and creative people can see outside the box. One of the symptoms of mania is they call visions of grandeur. It was like they say is delusional thoughts, like big thoughts, bigger thoughts than the average person. But as a bipolar person, I can see things that aren't reality. I can look at a church structure, for instance, and look at how things are done, and look at the Bible and say, this isn't right. This should be getting done like this. We should be doing this like this. No, we've done it like this for 2,000 years. Well, you've been doing it wrong for 2,000 years. You need to do it like this. Now, that can get you in trouble in a church, but if you're in any form of leadership, if you've got any form of power, if you've got any form of ability, if you've got any form of finance, you can finance or start something that's totally revolutionary that'll change the world. So many people say this stupid thing. Well, it's stupid because they don't know what they're doing. They say there's a fine line between genius and insanity. And people have no idea what they're saying. They're actually talking about someone who's bipolar. When they're manic, when they're in mania, they're getting thoughts outside the box. Like Thomas Edison said that he could speak through the ether. He said that he could speak to someone 100 miles away. And they locked him up and they put him in a padded cell for saying that. He got out of that padded cell. He got out of that hospital and he created radio. So what people perceive as illness, what people perceive as insanity, when they're talking about what they can do, that's insane. That's a delusion. But when they do it, they're called a genius. Now, there's another thing about geniuses is they're often not hailed a genius while they're living. It's like years later. Yeah, Thomas Edison, 10,000 attempts at the light bulb. How many of you people listening would have 10,000 goes at that? How many people would give up after 100? Say, this is stupidity, it's never going to happen. How many would give up after 1,000? How many would persist for 10,000? What about KFC? He had a restaurant. I'm not saying he's bipolar, but I'm just talking about genius here. He had a restaurant and the government moved the highway. And his restaurant was on the highway, so people would just stop and get his chicken. When they moved the highway, he lost 90% of his business. That's like having your business in the main street and the government coming along and saying, no, we're going to move the main street over here now. And all your foot traffic and all your driving traffic just left. So that's what happened. So he decided that he'd go and sell his recipe because he had great chicken and people loved it. And he went to 1,000 people to sell his chicken recipe before the first person said, yes, I'll buy that, I'll franchise that, I'll pay you a royalty for your chicken. 1,000 people said no before the first one said yes. How many people have got that position? Someone with bipolar who believes in themselves has that. Am I saying Colonel Sanders had bipolar? No, I'm saying he's a genius, and many geniuses have bipolar. So that's just a benefit of bipolar. You can think outside the box. You can see a reality that's not there. I can see so clearly about what the Illuminati does and the elite does because I can see outside the box. I can see how they're working. So let's talk about depression. So what's some symptoms of depression? Sleeping all the time. My psychiatrist, when I see her every 3 months, she asks me, how's my sleep? How often am I sleeping? And there was a time where I got in a cycle where I'd go to bed at 10 o'clock and couldn't get up to 5 o'clock the next afternoon. And that went for 4 years. That's a very deep and bad depression. So you sleep all the time. You have no energy. You're just drained of energy. Even with 15 or 16 hours sleep, you get up and you don't want to do anything. You've got no energy. You're not motivated to do anything. You can't motivate you. You can't be motivated. My brother Rodney has been in a 7-year depression so far. Um, you have poor hygiene. You couldn't be bothered having a shower. You couldn't be bothered cleaning yourself. You couldn't be bothered shaving. I told an old pastor of mine, a church I used to go to, if you ever see me with 3 days growth or a week's growth of seeing, I'm depressed, right? Because I only let my whiskers grow when I couldn't be bothered. So he used to be especially nice to me when he saw a lot of growth on my face, because I told him that that's a sign of depression. Very sad thoughts. You have very sad, very depressed thoughts. I can't really say a sign of depression is you're depressed, but that is, you're very sad and you can't snap out of it. The world thinks, just snap out of it. Well, you can't. You either got to be medicated out of it, or you've just got to cycle out of it. And it may take months, it may take years. And I can't personally take any medication except St. John's wort, which is like a natural antidepressant, and that was very effective for me. But you just can't snap out of it. And often these thoughts of continual depression, continual sadness can turn suicidal, and you can live with this idea of killing yourself. Almost 100% of bipolars try and kill themselves once in their lifetime, and only 20%, I heard this from a psychiatrist once, only 20% succeed. The reason that they don't succeed is they do their suicide was a silly way. Many people take pills, a lot of people cut themselves. A lot of people cutting themselves don't necessarily try and kill themselves, but cutting across the wrist is a lot of times trying to kill themselves. I was in a cycle ward once, and a guy asked if I got a shaver, and I thought nothing of it, and I gave it to him, and next time he's been rushed into emergency because he'd slashed his wrist with my razor. So I felt responsible for that. I didn't realise that's why I don't know why I had my razors and they hadn't been taken off me, but a lot of people that slash across are trying to kill themselves, but so many people can cut themselves, and that's another illness that's a very sad illness. Okay, so if you're Christian, Christian influence when you have bipolar can be good and bad, right? So the bad is you can have visions of grandeur, delusions, thinking that you're a savior to the world. So this idea that I was one of the two witnesses, which are these major prophets that are going to come and judge the world and do all these curses on the world. I was in that delusion, thinking that for 16 years of that 25 years. 16 years of that 25 years, no one could tell me I'm not. And the more the people said that I wasn't, the more I believed it, because that's how prophets have always been accepted, that they've always been rejected and always not believed in. So I was in this delusion for 16 years, and my parents were really worried. 8 of those years I was in that delusion. I was off my medication, and somehow I survived without being put in hospital. Also, a belief in heaven, belief in an afterlife, belief that you can go to heaven when you die, that can actually cause more suicides. When a person feels that they can just get out of this suffering life by killing themselves, then they can suicide more often, because they feel that they'll just be in heaven straight away. So there are some bad points. Some good points is certain verses in the Bible can keep you positive. There's a verse in the Bible that Paul mentions, the Apostle Paul, and he says, "I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me." He just lists before that verse all the bad things he went through, and they're horrific. He'd been stoned and beaten with rods, and stoned is they throw rocks at you until you're dead. He'd been stoned twice, where the people, it stopped moving, and the people throwing the rocks had walked away thinking he was dead, and he got up from that. Muslims still stone today. It's a very horrific way to die. So he was stoned twice, and his list of things he went through, no one would want to live through. At the end of that, he said, I've learned to be able to do all things through Christ who strengthens me. In other words, if you claim that verse on your life, if that verse is a dominant verse in your life, you can draw on the power of Jesus, draw on the power of the Holy Spirit, and sustain anything. So that verse can keep you alive. There's another verse that I know really well that I haven't written a book on, but I could write a book on this verse. All things work together for good for those who love God and walk according to his purposes. So if you're a Christian, you love God, you're doing everything God calls you to do in your life, everything that you go through will have a good ending. So even when I shared all that delusional psychotic thing to Amber on the video, when I explained that, when I made this video, when I made that 9-minute video, when she sees all that, it can work out to actually have her feel better about me and understand me more, and actually come to respect me more, respect that I can own up and man up to what I'm suffering, and not afraid to say, hey, this is my fault. And so that verses are really powerful. So verses in the Bible can really sustain you and keep you happy. If you have a walking, talking relationship with Jesus, and you can talk back to him, talk back and forth, a relationship with Jesus can really help you and really sustain you. Of course, talking to Jesus will have your psychiatrist going, oh yeah, he's hearing voices. So I'm actually schizoaffective, which is bipolar and schizophrenia. So they'll call talking to Jesus, they'll call that an auditory hallucination. And when I see saints, when I see angels, when I see Jesus, when I see God, when I go to heaven, that's called a visual hallucination. And both the auditory hallucination, they believe I'm not really hearing from God, and it's impossible to hear from God because God doesn't exist. That's what psychiatrists believe, most of them. And when I say I see Jesus, I interact with Jesus, I see angels, I see saints, and I'm talking to saints and interview saints, which 20 of my books are interviews with saints. Well, I've interviewed about 30 saints in my books. They think that's, in my imagination, that's crazy. So I'm talking to something and it's talking back, and I'm talking, having a two-way conversation, but they believe I'm talking out loud and I'm imagining what's coming back, and I'm talking out loud and I'm imagining, and they're even more crazy for believing that that's happening. But anyway, so there you go. Also, in a Christian sense, and you don't have to be a Christian, but to do this point, but it's more paramount if you have a faith. You develop empathy for other people who suffer, and you can be led to help others. So you can be spiritually, intuitively led to help other people who are suffering. So the benefits out of having depression and bipolar is you can develop empathy. My next point, and we're almost finished, is some popular people with bipolar. So if I typed in bipolar just before I did this to see what was being said about bipolar on YouTube, and on the first page of YouTube, within the first 30 selections, I found out that Mariah Carey has bipolar, Kanye West, the singer, has bipolar, Catherine Zeta-Jones, Michael Douglas's wife, the actress, has bipolar, Charlie Sheen, the comedian and actor, has bipolar, and these can all be found in the first 30 mentions on YouTube if you type in bipolar. So my closing thought is bipolar can really wear you down after a lot of years. You can really get upset after a lot of years. Now, I've heard testimony, not personally, not someone I know, but I've heard of testimony of people being spiritually healed of bipolar. It's never happened to me. I've thought it happened to me and ended me up in hospital 3 times. I told Jesus and I talked to him and I've seen him. I've seen him in visions. I've met him in the flesh 5 times. I've got a tremendous relationship with Jesus, and if you want to check out my books, you'll see that I have a great relationship with Jesus. I forgot my point there. So, but even years and years as a Christian, bipolar can wear you down. Yeah, you can be healed of it, but my point was, I've told Jesus that if he ever wanted to heal me and wanted me to believe I was healed, he's got to come down in the flesh, like I've met him in the flesh before. He's got to come down in the flesh and go in and see my psychiatrist and convince her that he is Jesus and tell her that I'm going off my medication. If that doesn't happen, I'm never going to go off my medication. No matter who, no matter what, no matter whoever says what to me that I'm healed, I still won't go off it. It's just because, 6 to 10 weeks after I go off my medication, I end up in hospital. And hospital is not fun. You think you're crazy. Getting locked up with crazy people is just not fun at all. Certainly, in hospital, you can't have a laptop. You can't be on the internet. I'm always on my computer. I'm always on the internet. Give me 6 or 8 weeks without a computer, without anything to do, just drives you. If you're not already insane, it drives you insane. I was coming out of breakfast and I said to one of the psychiatrist nurses, or one of the nurses, I said to him, this is driving me bloody crazy being in here with nothing to do. And he said, well, that's a sign that you're getting well, because only a well person would be frustrated with this psych ward. So you should be out pretty soon if you're feeling that way. And so that was great. So to all those people who've watched this, I'm not preaching Jesus at you. It's not my intention to have you go and read my books. It's not my intention to convince you that I'm right about my faith and you're wrong about your faith. This isn't a Christianese video. I'm just giving my perspective as a born-again Pentecostal Christian. I can hear from Jesus. You go to my YouTube channel. I've done prophecies for people. I've done angel messages for people. I can tell people their destiny, what 9 major things they're meant to do with their life. I make a living out of speaking like a psychic to Christians. God is real. He really speaks through me. He's a real entity, but I'm not here to convert you. I'm certainly not here to sell my books, but if you are a Christian, my books are very good at teaching you how to live the proper Christian life. If I tried to write a book on how to live the proper Christian life, I couldn't do it. But within the 55 books that I have, the overall message is this is how to live a Christian life. So God bless you. God bless you, Amber, if you watch this. Thank you. One of the main reasons I did this was for you, to give you an insight into things about me. Amber is a girl that I'm seeing that I really care about. And I care about you too, even if you're a stranger. And I look forward to your feedback on this video, or even an email. In my description tag down below is my website, and you can get my email address from there. God bless.